This is becoming quite a popular car that a lot of you guys keep wanting to build. We have a 2012 to 2014, I don't remember which year exactly, STI hatch, stock block, we're doing it again, rotated 6466 stock motor car. Like I said, who knows how long it'll live? I don't know, you don't know, the owner don't know, nobody knows. Sometimes they last a while, sometimes they last a couple days. But regardless of the fact, I'll build it, I'll put it together. The owner knows the risks of going into a stock motor, high horsepower build. So let me give you guys a quick rundown on the car and then we're gonna get cracking on this because I'd like to get this done in the next couple of days. This thing is pretty much 100% stock with the exception of a downpipe and a boost controller, I believe, and it's only tuned on like 8 PSI, which is really odd. But regardless of the fact, this thing's gonna become a completely different car by the time that we are done with it. So over here, we've got a Radium dual fuel pump hanger. This is actually out of my 17 STI when it had the 6-cylinder in it. This has two Walbro 535s. This should be able to give all the fuel. Precision 6466, new timing belt kit, X-clutch twin disc, IAG AOS, another box of goodies up here, which I don't even know what's in there. We have a flex fuel sensor set up, some more boxes of parts. Back here we have an ETS 3.5-inch intercooler, ETS rotated kit, ETS exhaust manifold, ETS intercooler piping, HKS blow-off valve for this. So this thing is going to be quite the rowdy vehicle. It'll be fairly rowdy. We are gonna be doing a timing belt on this engine also, so the engine's obviously going to come out. We'll do the timing belt kit, we'll put a clutch in it, we'll put the engine back in, and then we'll start putting all the goodies on. So realistically, this car will probably end up in the 600 to 700 wheel horsepower range on E85. Like I said, for how long it'll last, we don't really know. So let's just jump into this. I'm gonna go ahead and get the quick jacks under the car. I'm gonna start to let the oil drain. I'm gonna start to let the coolant drain. While both of those drain, I am going to just start ripping this thing apart. Intercooler, intake, airbox, all that stuff, get it all out of here, get this engine ready to come out. Once again, with these types of setups, this will not be a step-by-step walkthrough. If you are looking for that, I will link it right there. So let's get into this and turn this thing into a high horsepower time bomb. Mochi, what do we build? This is a bomb factory. We build bombs. So the first thing we gotta do is obviously get the car up in the air. Since I have our 22B replica kind of chilling on the lift right now, the quick jacks come in clutch for this. So the way that I like to do this, and I say this all the time and people still criticize me for it, I like to take everything off the engine before I take the engine out. That is going to include the intake manifold. Yes, I am fully aware you can take the engine out, no problem with the intake manifold on. The way that I just prefer to do this is getting literally everything off. So that way I can just pull it out as a naked engine. It's really only 6 bolts and a couple clamps and you can get the intake manifold off no problem. I just find it easier. That way I can actually get our engine hoist attached up to the engine nicely so I'm not having to do any like weird mounting on the intake manifold. I've pulled threads off of it before, not trying to do that. I've been moving a little bit slower on this one, but this is pretty much ready to come out at this point. We need to undo the pitch stop, disengage the clutch fork from the throwout bearing, undo all the bell housing bolts, and then we can pull this thing out. We'll put on our new X clutch. We will get this thing retimed, clean it up a little bit, drop it back in here, and then from there we can actually start putting a lot of the fun goodies on, like the big turbo, the fuel hanger, the AOS, flex fuel sensor, all sorts of goodies over here. This is when it'll get fun. Right now this is just kind of like maintenance and preventative what we're doing. And then once it goes back in, fun stuff, then we build the bomb. Yeah. Engine is out and it came out with really no trouble at all. Sometimes these older higher mileage engines will want to seize to the transmission, not necessarily on like the throwout bearing side, but like the little studs that are right here, they just hold on for dear life. This one just came out without any issue. Undid all the bolts, undid the throwout bearing, and just bloop, came right out. Now we need to replace timing belt on this. So crank pulley is gonna come off, timing covers are gonna come off, we're gonna put it at top dead center, swap out all of the timing, get this thing off of the stand, put our new X clutch twin disc on this, and we might We'll probably throw on the exhaust manifold while it's on the stand because it'll be a little bit easier to get in. With these, you can't pull the engine out with the O2 sensor still in the exhaust manifold. I opt to just take out the exhaust manifold. But if you're gonna pull the engine with the exhaust manifold on, do make sure that you take out the O2 sensor. If not, it will hit the frame and you'll damage the O2 sensor and you're gonna have to replace it. So let's go ahead and jump on timing. This shouldn't be too bad. I should be able to get timing knocked out relatively quickly. I've been moving pretty slow today. Sometimes you're just feeling a little slow. A little like jellyfish-like. You just want to jellyfish through life. And that's what we're doing right now. The owner wanted to opt in to get new timing replaced because I don't think we recalled when it was last swapped. So granted, we don't know if this engine is even going to live a long life with everything that we're doing to it. It's still a good preventative maintenance to do anyways if we're going to be pushing the car as hard as we are. So we are using an ASIN timing belt kit on this. It is pretty much OEM in the sense. Next morning, I got the engine in. I ran into some issues with the X clutch. So I put the X clutch on, I was getting it to go in the car, and there was an issue with it's a monolock collar. It's the collar that locks onto the throwout bearing. On the X clutch, it would just fall off. And what happens is the throwout bearing grabs onto this ring, and every time you push in the clutch, it pulls it away from the clutch to disengage the clutch. And I didn't feel comfortable putting that clutch in knowing that this collar so easily falls out of the clutch. So I talked to the owner of the car. I had a spare ACT twin disc sitting here, the brand new in box. We opted to pull the X clutch off. He's gonna try to return it. And I put the ACT on the engine and put that in the car. Everything works great. Our go-to clutches for all these cars is either ACT or XD. They're reliable, they're good, they hold power, they feel solid. That's just what works. So the X clutch, it's unfortunate. I've dealt with a couple of X clutches in the past. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of them, but engine's in, clutch is operational. Now we can get to the fun stuff because that clutch holdup was a couple hour issue that we were trying to resolve and find a good solution. Because buying a second twin disc, it's not cheap. A lot of this stuff is not cheap. So at this point, we can actually start getting into the fun stuff. I think where we're gonna start is on the turbo kit. Let's get our ETS turbo kit kind of laid out. We'll see what we're working with. We'll see what we got. I believe it's going to be V-band up pipe, V-band down pipe, the whole kit and caboodle for all that. What do we have here? We got foam, our oil feed and drain tubes there, up pipe intake tube, which is gnarly big, couplers, intercooler pipe, everything else we're using. More V-bands, which is always nice, and then our downpipe, wastegate dump, rear section of the downpipe. So that's everything in here. Wastegate, yeah! This should be our wastegate, which is a precision. I am gonna have to swap the spring out in this for a stiffer spring, which thankfully they do get us all the springs, hardware, the wastegate itself, and then spring. Order of operations. We are going to first start and set the wastegate spring pressure. So I think I'm gonna have this at 18 PSI. From there, we can get the wastegate put onto the up pipe. Up pipe can go in the car with the wastegate on it, because I'm gonna be honest, trying to put the fire lock ring with this in the car. On a rotating kit, it's not too bad, but it's way easier if you can just do it on the bend. We'll set the spring, we'll get the wastegate on the up pipe can go in the car, turbo can go on up pipe, down pipe can go on turbo. These clamps are gonna be your best friend when doing wastegates, dude. Let this up kind of slowly. Oh, okay, there it is. Large blue spring is actually just 18 PSI, so that's literally all we need in there. Oh, holy shit. Only sucks, kinda. Please do not shoot. Now to put the wastegate actually onto the up pipe, and then the up pipe can actually go in the car. wastegate positioned, I need to get the dump tube on there because I know this is going to need to be trimmed because they are just way too long from the factory. You guys can see why I like to cut them. They hang down pretty low. So, I mean, he's stock ride height. Maybe I'll leave, I'm gonna cut it. I'm just gonna cut it. No, I'm gonna leave it. Grab our spoolie boy. We have to clock this so that way the drain is going in the right spot, the compressor housing is going in the right spot. It's essentially lining up the turbo. So you have to loosen the hot side and the cold side of the housing. And then once those are loose, you can spin them. And you guys will see after I start to get this clamp on here a little bit more so this actually holds. So it's essentially gonna be putting the turbo like that. But I need to kind of keep this in one spot. So I got word that our fuel system was on the way, so I started knocking out some OEM stuff in here, radiator in, radiator hoses, AC belt on, heater core hoses, things like that. And we got our fuel system. So I am going to have to look at IAG's instructions on how to route this kit. Normally when it comes to fuel systems, I build my own and I don't typically use pre-made kits like this. There's nothing wrong with using a pre-made kit like this. I just personally prefer doing it my own way. So they give you all the pre-bent lines, injectors, we have fuel pressure regulator. This is an Aeromotive A1000. We do have a gauge, but we are using an IBR fuel pressure sensor, so we will not be using the gauge. IAG fuel rails, plug and play adapters, all the fittings, brackets, bolts, IBR flex fuel kit with their brain and the flex fuel sensor and everything like that. So let me just figure this out because I have absolutely no idea where all of this goes. But once all the flex fuel or once all the fuel system and flex fuel stuff is in, from there we can actually get everything else around the turbo kit pretty much sorted. The intake manifold can go back on permanently. We can get the turbo situation figured out permanently, and a lot of this can start to go together for good. Putting the fuel system together is pretty straightforward if you've done it before. If you haven't, what you're gonna do is you're gonna get the fuel rail set up with all their AN fittings. You're gonna get the injectors set into the TGV housings. You're gonna get the fuel rail put on top of that, then bolt it all down. You shouldn't have any issues. You do gotta lube up the O-rings and be careful because they do tear relatively easily, but figured we'd get the entire fuel system just kind of knocked out and out of the way because once the fuel system's in, we can start putting the intake manifold on and a lot of other things on permanently just because a lot of these fuel lines run underneath of the intake manifold. And once the intake manifold's on, obviously don't have clearance for it. Now, speaking of manifold, there was a lot of adjustment that had to go into getting the turbo in the proper place. So you'll see me take the intake manifold on and off a whole bunch, the turbo on and off a whole bunch, and that's honestly just to be able to get the clocking correct on the turbo. If the clocking of the turbo is not proper, you'll run into issues where the downpipe won't line up, the charge piping won't line up, your intake's not gonna line up, your oil drain and your oil feed aren't gonna line up. So you gotta take the time to make sure it's all aligned properly, otherwise you're gonna have to take it off again later. Things got out of hand a little bit quick and I just started going to town. So fuel system is all in. This is IAG's pre-made fuel system. It's not my favorite. It does fit decent and it does work well. Gives you an Aeromotive A1000. We have the IBR fuel pressure sensor, IBR flex fuel kit, flex fuel sensors there. The brain of it is here. Fuel lines go down. They do some weird 180s. I'm gonna be honest, the driver's side one was not the easiest to tighten down there, but it is tight. I'm gonna have to check it for fuel leaks, not a big deal. I did have to build a bracket for the AOS to mount the AOS. He did get the IAG AOS pitch stop bracket, but it puts it on this side of the pitch stop and it doesn't fit with like any intercooler piping. The only time I could foresee something like that working is if you have a forward facing manifold. It's the only time I could see that pitch stop bracket working. But regardless of the fact, we're chooching through. Engine harness is in, it's all plugged up and whatnot, so we need to tackle the AOS next. Once the AOS is actually tackled, we can bolt the intake manifold down permanently because I am going to run this AOS in a way where it deletes the expansion tank up here, and a lot of people always ask, how do you delete the expansion tank? I'll actually walk you through it real quick. So on the bottom of the AOS, you have your two coolant lines, which these ones are tucked way back and flipped around and whatnot. So you have two coolant lines on the bottom of the AOS. You're gonna route one of them to the back of the cylinder head right here, and that's going to return the coolant back to the engine. And you're gonna have one feeding up from this water pump line right here, which would normally come out to a hard line that runs across the engine, that line that we cut out earlier. So you're gonna have the AOS going to that. the AOS going to the other one, and that's going to complete the loop for the cooling system. Now, this only works with turbos that are not water cooled. If you have a turbo that is water cooled, what you can do is feed it from the water pump up to the AOS to the turbo back to the cylinder head. So you're just creating the loop. You're just finishing the loop for the cooling system. So let me go ahead and tackle this AOS. We'll get all the AOS lines hooked up and done with. We can get the intake manifold permanently bolted back down at that point, and then keep going through this. I'm trying to get this thing done tomorrow, which is ideally the goal. And so far, I think we're gonna be able to do that. The AOS isn't too bad to do with a setup like this. Normally I'll have to build a bracket to mount the AOS to the right of the turbo and to the left of the pitch stop. The hoses route fairly easily, 2 of them to each one of the cylinder heads. You got the block breather, you got the oil return line, you've got your big dong that goes down under the cars, your big breather fitting. We are running a competition conversion on this AOS versus the street, since clearly we don't have a typical turbo inlet to return some of those oil lines or those vent lines too. We're almost wrapped up at this point. Intake manifold's on, boost controller's on, rear section of the downpipe is on. We got the O2 bung welded onto the back of the downpipe because that is there to be able to, it needs to be there to be able to tune the car. I'm not sure why ETS doesn't give you a second O2 bung on the downpipe, but it's whatever, it's easy enough to weld on. So at this point, all we have left are front mount intercooler piping, cut the bumper, radium fuel hanger, and wire it up, and I believe at that point we're done. So we're gonna jump straight into the front mount. It shouldn't be too bad. I have how-tos on how to install all of this stuff. Literally every part that we've put on this car, I have a how-to on how to install it if you're doing it on your own car that gives you step-by-step instructions. So it's really not in-depth stuff for what we're installing on this. It's literally, we're making a bomb. I keep saying it, but dude, I give it, the owner's fully aware. I want to disclose, the owner is fully aware of the potential outcome of his car. He fully understands. So I have a feeling we're gonna be seeing this car again in the near future. So in the meantime, we're gonna make it fast though. We're not here for a long time, we're here for a good time. Front mount intercoolers, those are pretty direct on how they go on. You can't mess them up too much. With a lot of front mounts, you do need to trim the little metal piece that sits directly behind the front mount. Otherwise, they can stab into the core, ruin the fins, puncture the front mount, and it's just not what you want to happen. Outside of that, the piping is pretty straightforward. Now, we didn't have the correct hot side piping for this, which made things a little bit interesting. Intercooler piping pretty much all done. Bumper's cut for the intercooler, it fits perfect. I wanted to try to cut it a little bit closer to the intercooler to try to fix that gap, because a lot of the time people cut these way too far out here. I'm guilty of it, I've done it in the past. But I mean, this one fit up real nice and snug to that intercooler core. I love it. So there was one issue though. I have no hot side intercooler piping, like at all. Well, I do, but for a stock location turbo, and quite clearly this is not a stock location. So I'm gonna give you guys the tea on this one. So this car actually came to me from, do I have a booger? Do you have a booger hanging out on those? So this car came to me from another shop, another local shop that I am not too fond of. There are a lot of good Subaru shops in the Pacific Northwest up here. There's also a lot of bad ones. This one came from, in my opinion, one of the bad ones. And they had him buy a whole bunch of stuff that quite clearly didn't need to be purchased for this car, and things that we weren't going to use anyways. So the owner, I told him, hey, return this stuff. If you're gonna return it, send it back. He sent back a lot of it. Like, this shop had him buy a radium hanger, and Radium stopped installing fuel pumps in their fuel hangers, I think like 2 years ago, and they told him, yeah, you don't need to buy fuel pumps, it comes with it. Big problem there. He ended up buying the one that I have out of my 17 STI, old baby blue out there, but they told him specifically not to buy the ETS hot side intercooler piping kit. For summer, it's $200. That's pretty cheap for some intercooler piping, if in my opinion, versus like having somebody fab you intercooler piping. It's just weird. They were gonna try to like cut and make stock piping work. I went through a whole bunch of my old like random part, because I'm a hoarder, man. I keep a lot of like intercooler couplers, clamps, pipes, things like this. And I was like, this is off of a Grimspeed intercooler kit. And I was like, this looks fairly similar to the ETS one. I was like, maybe I can make it work. I could cut this pipe, I could bead roll it, put a 45-degree coupler on there. Obviously, we don't have 45-degree coupler. That's the only reason why we didn't do it. So the owner ended up opting to overnight a set of hot pipes for it. But The root thing is, if you take your car to a shop and you know for a fact, you're like, hey, I'm pretty sure I need this part for the car, and they're like, you don't need it, and you start getting some red flags, ask questions. If you don't feel comfortable leaving your car there, having them build your car, definitely take it elsewhere. Like this one, when I tore it apart, this car was fairly stock. It had an external wastegate, an up pipe, and a boost controller. No, up pipe, external wastegate, boost controller, down pipe. That's all that was done to this car. And he was complaining that the car only made 8 PSI and it was tuned. I was like, that's really weird that the car would only be tuned to 8 PSI. I'm like, factory what? They were 18-ish PSI on a GR STI. And come to find out that they had blocked the boost reference off of the turbo. They had a little hose coming off of it, shoved a screw in it and zip tied it. The wastegate lines were routed incorrectly. The wastegate spring was an 8 PSI spring for some reason. Normally we do 1 bar, which is about 14 PSI, 14, 15 PSI, somewhere in that range for the wastegate. Cautious, you guys. So this thing is pretty much sorted now. Everything is done with the exception of the radium fuel hanger that has to go in. Like I said, that's my old one, so that has 2 wall bureau 535s in it. We're gonna hardwire both of those with Radium's hardwire kit. We're not gonna build the fuse box for this one like I did my own cars, just because it's fairly expensive for me to do that for other people, but it's whatever. So we're gonna get this fuel hanger assembly installed, get it wired up, and then wait for some either a 45-degree coupler to show up or the hot side piping to show up, and then we're good to go on this thing. But funny enough, I actually had this GR STI also get dropped off. It's that really nice like plasma blue, purpley bluish color. This one's getting a built motor, some fun bolt-ons on it, getting tuned. So this one is going in the shop right after this one leaves. Which is funny because the Blurple STI actually came from a different shop locally. This one came from a shop, that one came from a different shop. They're trying to charge them like 8 grand to replace a short block. That's absurd. But hey, this works out perfect. I've been doing, you guys haven't gotten a video in a little while because I've been doing a lot of body work on the 22B. I've got the hood prepped and ready for primer. I almost have one of the, I don't even actually almost have one of the doors done. I have to weld some holes on it and then clean all that up. So it's just like a lot of body work with this car right now. I did get word the wide body is almost shipping out for this. So that's good, because I mean, you know, it works out because it gets me a couple customer cars to knock out, make some bread, then get back on the 22B, get that thing going, and then get old baby Blue in here for a good old my little crutch. God, dude, I'm such a fucking weeb for this engine. Oh, God, I can't wait till you're stroked and all the big good stuff going on there. Later, soon. I have knocked out the remaining things on the Subaru this morning. I was able to make a 90-degree coupler work and cut the stock intercooler piping and make all that work to get this going. I have the fuel pump hanger installed and wired in. I do need to take it back out though, because I put a VA fuel level sensor in it that was already on my car. I just left it on there. I was like, oh, this will work. It doesn't work. You have to have a GR1. So I pulled the GR1 off the stock hanger, so I do have to pull that out. It'll take me like 20 minutes to do. I'm not stressing that. The hardwire is done as well. So this is kind of what we're looking at. Not too shabby of a job here for not having the proper piping or couplers to make this work. So I'm super happy with how that came out. The fuel pumps are both, actually both the fuses are right here, although we only have a fuse in one of them, primarily because this car doesn't need 2 535s right now on a stock motor. One 535 should get it around 600-ish wheel horsepower. So once we have the cooling system burped, we're gonna jump back, pull the fuel hanger, swap it for the proper fuel level sensor, which is this guy, and it also has a fuel temp sensor, so we need to put both of these on the radium hanger. That was my oopsie, but that is an easy fix. So let's get old different Blue Bertha here started up. We have no coolant leaks, no oil leaks, so we should be pretty set to go here. Fingers crossed. I do have to set fuel pressure, so I need to let it warm up, come down, get to operating temp, and then I set fuel pressure on this. We're gonna do 43.5 base fuel pressure off of reference, so I need to pull the reference off of the manifold, then set fuel pressure, then I can put the reference back on. thing I need to do is make sure all the air comes out. So you'll probably hear me rev it up a couple times just to get the water pump to spin faster, but we have 0 leaks. Everything's looking good. The turbo blanket's burning off. I'm hyped. So I just pulled the fuel hanger back out, swapped the fuel level sensor. I didn't film any of it because I wanted to get it fixed. Fuel level reads, no more check engine light for high circuit on fuel level or fuel temp. So now I'm just gonna let it burp. The owner's on his way to pick it up right now. I'm gonna let it burp just until probably he gets here, monitor it a little bit more, drive it around the parking lot, make sure it's all good. And then this thing's ready to go to the dyno. So I will be at the dyno when this car is getting tuned. That should be this weekend, I think, coming up this weekend. So if you guys are curious, I'll do a dyno video on this car. I'll probably throw the RX-7 back on the dyno also, just to kind of see how it does. If we have time, maybe do some E85 tuning on the RX-7. I'll see if Ryan's available for that, but I guess let me just keep burping it for a little bit longer. Seems to be doing awesome. I always think it's fun to do these types of videos where we take something that's completely stock and we just turn it into something absurd. It's not often that we get to do that just because there's so much money involved in going into doing something like this that it's really customer by customer basis. I can't afford to just like, boom, everything all at once on my own cars, but it's fun to be able to do this on other people's. They get excited, they get happy. This is Alexi.
What's up, guys?
This is his STI. He hasn't seen it in person yet.
Dude, I haven't heard it yet either. This thing went from bone stock almost to what's
pretty much stock.
What's
stock.
left to stock, yeah.
It's got a stock motor.
Yeah.
It'll last a little while.
Only stock thing left, yeah, for now.
Keys are in it. You can just start it up.
Yeah?
They should be in it. If not, they're in the shop somewhere and I gotta find them.
Dude, it sounds way different.
Yeah.
Way different.
I drove it around here a little bit. You can tell it's on a bass tune.
Yeah?
Like I said, be very gentle with it right now.
Oh, for sure.
The big thing, watch coolant temp.
Yeah,
especially with your radiator.
Yeah. Was it this guy right here?
Yeah, the freaking nipple broke off of it, so I made something work in the meantime until this new one comes. Fuel pumps, this is your main pump. This one's your secondary.
Yep.
Secondary has no fuse in it. Yep. So we just leave that fuseless, but it is all wired.
If I wanted it.
Yeah, if you want the second pump, or if for some reason one pump ever dies, you can pull the fuse, put it in the other one.
Yeah.
That is all I've got for you guys on this one. Another stock motor, full built car. It looks so sleeper-esque. It looks so stock on the outside with just a massive front mount. And I mean, that's all you can see is the front mount.
It's stock suspension, I mean,
it's literally all stock everything.
Stock wheels technically too.
It's just painted stock wheels. Don't do this to your cars, by the way, unless you fully prepare. You know the consequences. I told everyone, you know the consequences.
I do. Fully know them. I'm already expecting a built motor.
All right, you can do this as long as you're aware of the consequences. And you lied, your valve cover is leaking. It's not just, it's a small leak, yeah, but it is leaking a little bit. I told you, you're like, no, I freehand pour all my oil. That's probably what all that is.
I mean, for 140K,
that's not bad.
Expected.
That's not bad. But anyways, with that, that's all I got for you guys on this one. If you like the video, you know what to do. Go ahead and hit that like button, turn it black, blue, green, yellow, purple, silver, cyan, whatever color it turns for you. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to be, I'll put it in one of these corners. No idea which one quite yet, but with that, I will catch you guys in the next one. So peace out, homies.